That night, I drove my daughter to the airport for what I thought would be just another business trip. Everything seemed normal until the moment my grandson, who is only 7 years old, grabbed my hand tightly. His eyes, filled with panic, made me freeze. With a trembling voice, he whispered to me, "Grandma, let's not go back to the house. This morning I heard Mom planning something against us. Please, believe me." In that instant, something inside me broke. Without asking questions, I started the car and fled with him into the darkness of the night. But before I continue, make sure you are already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you are watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My name is Helen. I am 70 years old, and until that night, I thought I knew my daughter, Claire, like the back of my hand. I have lived with her and my grandson, Aidan, since the death of my son-in-law 3 years ago. It was a car accident that left deep marks on all of us, especially on little Aidan, who since then has become an extremely observant and quiet child. That Thursday, we took Claire to O'Hare International Airport for a business trip to Seattle. She is a marketing manager at a large corporation and travels frequently. We arrived early. The terminal was relatively empty, and the freezing air from the air conditioning made me pull my thin coat tighter against my body. "It will only be 3 days, Mother." Claire smiled as she adjusted her carry-on suitcase. "Take good care of Aidan and don't forget his medication." Aidan, by my side, held his dinosaur backpack firmly, watching his mother with attentive eyes. He has never been one for many words, but that night he was even quieter than usual. "Everything will be fine, my life. We always manage, right, Aidan?" I tried to include my grandson in the conversation, but he only nodded silently. Claire crouched down in front of her son and fixed the hair falling over his eyes. "Behave yourself with Grandma, okay? Mommy will be back soon." She kissed him on the forehead, and Aidan remained motionless like a little statue. I watched my daughter with a full heart. Despite the difficulties, she had transformed into a strong and independent woman. After losing her husband, she immersed herself in work with even more determination, perhaps as a way to escape the pain. I admired her resilience, even though I noticed a certain emotional distance growing between us. "I have to go," she said, checking her watch. "Boarding starts in half an hour." We hugged briefly. A mechanical hug without much warmth, something that had become common between us in recent times. She kissed me on the cheek, took her suitcase, and walked toward the TSA checkpoint. We watched her silhouette move away until it disappeared into the crowd. "Let's go, Aidan." "It's getting late," I said, taking my grandson's hand. We walked down the terminal hallway toward the parking garage. Aidan didn't say a single word during the entire walk. His silence didn't worry me. It was just his way. Since his father's accident, he communicated more with looks and gestures than with words. The parking garage was dimly lit. Only a few yellowish lamps cast shapeless shadows across the concrete floor. Few cars were parked there. At that moment, I pressed the alarm button, and the lights of our old Honda Civic flashed. I started walking toward the car, gently pulling Aidan by the hand. It was then that I felt it. A strong, almost violent tug. Aidan had stopped suddenly and was gripping my wrist with such force that his small fingernails left marks on my wrinkled skin. I turned around, confused. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, crouching down to be at his eye level. Aidan's face was pale under the yellowish light of the lamppost. His eyes, always attentive, were now wide with pure terror. I had never seen an expression like that on his little face. A chill ran down my spine. "Grandma," he whispered so quietly I had to lean in to hear. "Let's not go back to the house. Please, believe me." I stood there confused, thinking that perhaps he was afraid of the empty house without his mother. "Don't worry, my love. We'll be fine, just the two of us for a few days." He shook his head vigorously, squeezing my wrist even tighter. "No, Grandma, don't go back to the house," he repeated, now with a breaking voice. "This morning I heard Mom on the phone in her home office. She was talking about us." My heart sped up. "What did you hear, Aidan?" He swallowed hard, his lips trembling slightly, and leaned even closer to my ear. "Mom said that after we fell asleep, that everything was already arranged. She said, 'Make sure there are no mistakes. The gas needs to look like an accidental leak.'" My blood froze in my veins. I stood paralyzed, looking into those innocent eyes that now carried the weight of a terrible secret. "Please, Grandma." His voice was a trembling thread. Believe me, this time. That last sentence hit me like a slap in the face. I remembered other moments when Aidan tried to alert me when he said he had seen his mother hiding documents in the office, when he mentioned she had spent the whole night tampering with the kitchen pipes. I always believed they were stories of a child trying to get attention. My hands began to tremble. I didn't want to believe it. It was impossible that Claire, my own daughter, could be planning to kill us. But the terror in Aidan's eyes was too real. "Okay, honey," I whispered, caressing his pale face. "I believe you. We are not going to the house tonight." The relief in his gaze was immediate and so profound that it dispelled any doubt I might have had. He knew. Somehow, this 7-year-old boy had discovered a terrible plan. I stood up with trembling legs. My mind was working frantically. If what Aidan said was true, we couldn't just go to a hotel or a friend's house. Claire could track the credit card. She could call our acquaintances. I got into the car with Aidan, helped him put on his seatbelt, and sat behind the wheel. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely put the key in the ignition. "Where are we going, Grandma?" Aidan asked, his small voice breaking the tense silence. I had no idea. I looked in the rearview mirror at that worried little face and tried to sound confident. "We're going to a safe place, honey. I just need to think a little." I started the engine and slowly drove out of the parking garage. We needed time, we needed a plan, and above all, we needed to discover why my own daughter wished to see us dead. I drove for almost an hour with no certain destination, just getting away from our house in the suburbs. Aidan fell asleep in the back seat, overcome by emotional exhaustion. Occasionally, I watched him through the rearview mirror, his serene face in contrast to the terror he had shown in the parking lot. How could such a small child carry such a heavy secret? As I drove through the increasingly deserted streets of the city, my mind worked frantically, attempting to connect the dots. Claire had changed in recent months. That was undeniable. More distant, more impatient, always locked in her office, making calls in a low voice. I attributed it all to grief, work, stress, and the pressures of being a single mother. But now, remembering every detail, every strange look, every conversation interrupted when I entered the room, a sinister pattern began to form. I stopped the car at a 2-4-hour gas station on the outskirts of the city. We needed a plan, and I needed to think clearly. I bought a watered-down coffee at the convenience store and went back to the car, watching Aidan, who was still sleeping. It was then that my cell phone vibrated in my coat pocket. Claire's name lit up the screen. My heart raced. Her flight should have taken off a long time ago. Why was she calling? With trembling hands, I answered. "Hello? Mom?" Claire's voice sounded strangely calm. "Where are you? You should have arrived home an hour ago." I felt a chill run down my spine. How did she know we weren't home? "Oh, we decided to stop for dinner," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. Aidan was hungry. Silence on the other end. Then, "I see. And where are you having dinner?" "At that diner near the mall," I replied vaguely. "Shouldn't you be on the plane?" "There was a problem with the flight," she said quickly. "It was rescheduled for tomorrow morning. I'm heading back home now." I froze. That made no sense. Claire always meticulously checked flight schedules. She would never allow such an unforeseen event to happen. "Oh, what a shame," I replied, trying to sound natural. "So, we'll see you at home later?" "Yes, of course," she said, her voice suddenly sweet. "Don't worry about rushing. Enjoy dinner. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I hung up and stared at the phone. It was a trap. She was checking to see if we had discovered anything. Maybe she had cameras in the house. Maybe she realized Aidan had heard her in the morning. Aidan moved in the back seat, slowly opening his eyes. "Was it Mom?" he asked with a perceptiveness that scared me. I nodded, unable to hide the truth from those sharp eyes. "She said the flight was canceled. She's going back to the house." Aidan's eyes went wide with terror. "She knows, Grandma. She knows we found out." I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in my hands. "Aidan, I need you to tell me exactly what you heard this morning. Everything, every detail." He sat up straight, straightening his wrinkled t-shirt. He seemed much older than his 7 years when he began to speak. "Mom woke up very early. I heard her in the hallway and thought she was making breakfast, but she went into the office and closed the door." He hesitated, looking down. "I know I shouldn't have, but I went over there and stood listening behind the door." "It's okay, honey, continue." She was speaking very quietly, but I managed to hear. She said, "Yes, they will be alone. 3 days is enough time for it to look like an accident. The gas leak during the night? While they sleep, no one will suspect." Aidan paused, taking a deep breath, and then she said something about papers and insurance money. She said, "When they are out of the way, I can finally access everything." A chill ran through my body. Insurance, papers. Suddenly, it all started to make sense. 6 months ago, my late husband, Robert, had left documents regarding a substantial life insurance policy. Claire knew I was the primary beneficiary, with specific clauses that designated a considerable portion to Aidan, which he could only access upon turning 21. Claire was the trustee of the fund, but she couldn't touch the money, not while I was alive. There was also the house that belonged to Robert and me, and which, after his death, passed entirely to me. Claire lived with us, but the property was mine, a property that was appreciating more and more with the neighborhood's growth. "Aidan," I asked with a trembling voice, "had you heard your mother talking about money or Grandpa's insurance before?" He nodded slowly. "Many times. She always gets very angry when she talks about it. Once she said on the phone that she was stuck because of us." Every word was like a knife in my heart, my own daughter planning to kill us for money. It was so absurd, so monstrous, that my mind resisted accepting it, but the evidence was all there. The change in her behavior, the sudden interest in financial matters, the constant questions about my will, the business trips that seemed to appear out of nowhere, and now this fake canceled trip. She wanted to catch us off guard. She wanted to guarantee we would be at home sleeping when the accident happened. "What are we going to do, Grandma?" Aidan asked, his small voice bringing me back to reality. I looked at this extraordinary child who had sensed the danger before me, who had saved our lives with his observation and courage. "First, we are going to get even further away," I replied, starting the car engine again, "and then we are going to get proof." "Proof?" Aidan asked, confused. "Yes, honey, proof that shows your mother is planning something terrible, something we can take to the police." Aidan nodded gravely. This wasn't a conversation a grandmother should be having with her grandson. It wasn't a burden a child should carry, but we were in this together. It was just the two of us against someone I would never have imagined as an enemy. As I drove through the night, an idea began to form in my mind. A risky plan, but one that could give us the evidence we needed. "Aidan," I said, looking at him in the rearview mirror, "do you remember Mr. Ralph, the superintendent from our old building?" He nodded. Ralph was an old friend, a discreet and trustworthy man who had worked for decades in the building where we lived before moving to our current house. "I think we need to pay him a visit," I said, steering toward the old neighborhood. It was a risky bet, but at that moment we didn't have many options. We needed a safe place to spend the night, and more importantly, we needed help to unmask Claire before she could try again. The car clock read 11 p.m. when we finally arrived at the old brick building. My heart was beating fast as I parked on the parallel street, away from the building's cameras. If Claire was really looking for us, we couldn't leave tracks. "Stay here for just a minute, Aidan," I said, turning off the engine. "Grandma is going to check if Mr. Ralph is on the night shift." I got out of the car and walked quickly to the lobby entrance, keeping to the shadows. The lobby was lit, and to my relief, there was Ralph, his wrinkled face bent over a crossword puzzle magazine. I tapped lightly on the glass, and he looked up, confused at first, then surprised to recognize me. "Mrs. Helen?" He stood up, opening the door of the booth. "What are you doing here at this hour?" "Forgive me for showing up like this, Ralph," I spoke in a low voice, looking nervously around, "but I have a serious problem. I need your help." The small employee apartment in the basement of the building was simple but cozy. Ralph had lived there since his wife passed away 10 years ago. It was a discreet space with a separate entrance, invisible to anyone who didn't know the building well. Perfect for what we needed, a temporary hideout. Aidan was sitting at the kitchen table drinking a hot chocolate that Ralph had prepared. The old superintendent watched us with concern, still processing the incredible story I had just told him. "Mrs. Helen," he spoke finally, his deep voice breaking the silence, "are you sure about this? It is a very serious accusation against your own daughter." I sighed heavily. "I know, Ralph. It sounds like madness. I don't want to believe it myself, but—" I looked at Aidan, who kept his eyes fixed on the mug, but I can't ignore what Aidan heard. And there are other signs that I am only now managing to connect. Ralph nodded slowly, rubbing his stubbled chin. He had known our family for decades. He had seen Claire grow up. He had cried at my husband's funeral. "What do you plan to do, Mrs. Helen?" he asked. "We need proof," I replied, my mind still working on the plan I had started to form in the car. "If we go to the police now, with only the testimony of a 7-year-old boy, and my suspicions, they won't take us seriously. Claire is respected. She has a solid career. They would say it's just a misunderstanding, or worse, that I'm becoming senile." Ralph furrowed his brow, but didn't disagree. He knew I was right. "And where do I fit into this story?" he asked. "I need to go back to the house," I said, feeling Aidan tense up beside me. "Not to stay, but to look for evidence. I need to know exactly what Claire was planning, and I need Aidan to stay here safe while I do that." "No, Grandma," Aidan exclaimed, slamming the mug onto the table. "It's dangerous. Mom might come back." I took his cold little hands in mine. "I know, honey, but I'm going to be careful. I'm just going to take a quick look at her office to see if I find any clues. I'll get in and out before she realizes." Aidan shook his head, tears shining in his eyes. "I don't want you to go. I don't want to be left alone." "You won't be alone," I assured him. "Mr. Ralph is going to stay with you, and I promise I'll be back soon." "You shouldn't go alone," Ralph intervened, concern evident on his face. "If what you say is true, it is very risky." "I have no choice," I replied. "If Claire discovers we know something, she can destroy any evidence, or worse, she might try something more direct." I shuddered at the thought of the possibilities. "I need to act now, while she still believes we don't suspect anything." Ralph sighed, running a hand through his gray hair. "At least let me drive you there. I'll wait in the car, around the corner. If you don't come out in 20 minutes, I'm going to call the police." I nodded. It was better than going completely alone. "I want to go too," Aidan insisted. "No, honey," I said firmly. "It's too dangerous. I need you to stay here. Safe. Promise that I'll return." After more insistence, Aidan finally gave in, but not without hugging me tight enough to take my breath away. "Promise you'll be careful, Grandma," he whispered in my ear. "I promise," I replied, kissing his forehead. Ralph lent us an old cell phone, a prepaid burner phone, so we could communicate without using my phone, which Claire could track. We agreed on codes. 1 ring and hang up meant I was okay. 2 rings meant trouble. After ensuring Aidan was comfortable on the small sofa bed in the apartment, with strict instructions to lock the door and not open it for anyone but us, Ralph and I left, hearts heavy with what I was about to do. The clock on the dashboard read 1:20 a.m. when we stopped a block away from my house. The streets were completely deserted, just a few streetlights casting long shadows on the asphalt. "I have a bad feeling about this, Mrs. Helen," Ralph murmured, turning off the engine. "Are you sure you want to go?" I swallowed hard, observing the dark silhouette of my house at the end of the street. The windows were all dark. There was no sign of Claire's car in the driveway. "I have no choice," I repeated, more to convince myself than him. 20 minutes, as we agreed. If I don't return or call the police. Ralph nodded gravely. "May God protect you." I got out of the car and walked quickly along the sidewalk, keeping to the shadows. My heart was beating so loudly I was sure anyone yards away could hear it. The house was silent when I used my key to enter through the back door. I closed it softly behind me and stood in the dark kitchen, listening intently. Nothing but the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the living room clock. I took the small flashlight I had brought and illuminated the path to the hallway. I needed to get to Claire's office on the 2nd floor without making noise. Every floorboard that creaked under my feet sounded like thunder in the silence of the house. Reaching the foot of the stairs, I froze. A strange smell floated in the air, sweet and chemical at the same time. I sniffed again, trying to identify it. It was gas, not something different. Something that shouldn't be there. Climbing the stairs seemed like an eternity, every step carefully calculated to avoid the treads that usually creaked. In the 2nd floor hallway, I stopped in front of Claire's office door. It was locked, as I expected. I took the bobby pin I had prepared out of my pocket. Years ago, when Claire was a teenager and locked her bedroom door during her tantrums, I had learned to pick simple locks like this. I never thought I would use that skill in a situation like this. After a few tense minutes, I heard the satisfying click of the lock yielding. I pushed the door slowly, praying for the hinges not to squeak. Claire's office was impeccably organized as always. Bookshelves with management and marketing books, a dark wooden desk with a closed laptop, a leather swivel chair, nothing out of place. I closed the door behind me and began my search. The laptop was password protected, so I concentrated on the physical documents. I opened drawers carefully, examined folders, searched in every corner for anything suspicious. It was in the third drawer of the desk that I found something, a red folder different from the others, hidden under a stack of company documents. Inside were bank statements I had never seen before, accounts and names I didn't recognize, transfers of large sums to a certain M. Stone, and most alarming, a copy of my life insurance policy with marginal notes about values and payment clauses. My heart raced. It was real. Everything Aidan had heard was real. My own daughter was planning. A noise downstairs interrupted my thoughts, the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. I froze, blood chilling in my veins. Claire was back. Quickly, I grabbed the cell phone and dialed Ralph's number. 2 rings. Then I hung up. The danger signal. Immediately, I photographed the most incriminating documents with the cell phone camera. There was no time to examine everything, but I needed proof. I put the folder back exactly as I found it and hid behind the office door, turning off the flashlight. I heard footsteps on the stairs, now slow and deliberate footsteps. It didn't sound like Claire's rushed, firm walk. It was something more cautious. The adrenaline rushed through my veins. I was cornered. If I left the office, I would be seen. If I stayed, I would be found when Claire came in to work in the morning. Or worse, if she decided to enter the office now. The footsteps stopped in the hallway. I could hear breathing on the other side of the door. A shadow moved under the crack of the door, blocking the weak light from the hallway. Someone was out there, standing, as if listening. I held my breath, feeling cold sweat run down my back. The doorknob began to turn slowly. The office door opened a few inches with an almost imperceptible groan. I remained motionless, pressed against the wall behind the door, barely breathing. The darkness was my only ally. Now, a silhouette projected onto the office floor. It wasn't Claire. The stature was different, taller and wider. A man. The shadow stood still for a few moments, as if whoever it was listening intently. Then Claire's voice came from downstairs, muffled by the distance. "Marcus, is everything clear up there?" My heart stopped for a second. Marcus, the same name that appeared on the bank statements. M. Stone. Marcus Stone. "Just checking." A deep male voice replied just a few steps away from me. "The house is empty. No sign of them." I said something was wrong. Claire's voice sounded irritated, now closer. "They should be here. The plan was for tomorrow night after I got back from the trip. Now the timeline is all messed up." Claire's footsteps were coming up the stairs. I was trapped between 2 people who were apparently planning my death. My only exit would be through the office window that opened onto a narrow ledge over the backyard. A dangerous drop for anyone. Deadly for a 70-year-old woman. "I said it was risky involving the kid," the male voice continued, now moving away from the door toward the hallway. "Kids are unpredictable. He could have heard something." "Impossible," Claire replied, now in the hallway. "Aidan never wakes up before 7. And I always talk in the office with the door closed. Besides, even if he had heard, who would believe a 7-year-old boy? When Hisenly believe a 70-year-old boy?" A thud came from downstairs, followed by a muffled curse. "What was that?" Claire asked, alarmed. "I don't know," Marcus replied. "I'm going to check. You keep getting her room ready." The man's footsteps moved away quickly, going down the stairs. Claire stayed in the hallway for a few more seconds. Then I heard her footsteps heading toward my bedroom at the end of the hall. My mind worked frantically. Her room, preparing my room. What were they doing? And what had been that noise downstairs? Ralph must have entered the house after receiving my danger signal. My old friend, trying to help me, was now in danger too. I came out from behind the door, moving slowly not to make noise. Through the crack in the door, I could see the hallway was empty. Now, on tiptoes, I approached the office window. I needed to get out of there and alert the police. Not only was my life in danger, but also Ralph's, and most importantly, Aidan's. I opened the window with extreme care, avoiding making any sound. The ledge was narrower than I imagined, only about 12 inches wide. Below, The drop of nearly 20 feet ended on the backyard lawn. In other times, I wouldn't even consider this option, but desperation is a powerful motivator. I put one foot out, feeling the cold air of the early morning. I needed to gather all my courage to swing the other leg out the window and balance precariously on the ledge. My joints protested arthritis is no joke at 70, but fear gave me an agility I didn't know I still possessed. Suddenly, I heard angry voices downstairs. A dull thud, followed by a groan. My heart clenched as I recognized Ralph's voice. They had caught him. "Who else is with you, old man?" Marcus's harsh voice resonated through the house. "How did you know to come in here?" I couldn't hear Ralph's response, but the sound of something heavy falling made me shudder. I closed my eyes for a second, silently begging forgiveness from my old friend. I couldn't help him now. The best chance we had was if I managed to escape and get help. I began to move laterally along the ledge, inch by inch, my back pressed against the wall, fingers gripping the rough texture of the bricks. Sweat ran down my face despite the cold night. There was a trellis covered in ivy at the corner of the house. If I could reach it, maybe I could use it to climb down to the garden. It was risky, but less so than jumping directly. "Claire, I found someone!" Marcus's voice yelled from inside the house, an old guy trying to break in through the back. "What? Who is he?" My daughter's voice sounded distant, coming from my room. "He won't talk, but he seems to know your mother. She must be close." I froze on the ledge. They knew I was at the house. The search would intensify. I no longer had time for caution. I needed to act. With a surge of adrenaline, I reached the trellis and began to descend, ignoring the pain in my joints and the scratches from the wooden stakes. I half slipped, half climbed down the last few yards, landing awkwardly on the grass with a dull thud that made my left hip throb with pain. There was no time to lament. I got up, limping, and ran as silently as I could through the backyard toward the low fence that divided our property from the neighbor's house. As I slipped through the shadow of the trees, I heard the office window being thrown open violently. A flashlight beam swept the garden, almost catching me. I ducked behind a bush, holding my breath. "Is there anyone down there?" Marcus's voice resonated through the night. "I'm going to check. Keep the old man tied up." I climbed the fence with difficulty, falling onto the other side in the miller's yard. Our elderly neighbors, who fortunately were heavy sleepers and were currently away in Florida, I ran across their lawn, skirting the house, feeling a sharp stab in my hip with every step. When I reached the parallel street, I was panting, but fear propelled me. I moved as far away as possible from the house, running through the shadows until I reached a main avenue where a few bars were still open with people on the sidewalk. I took the cell phone and dialed 911 with trembling hands. While I waited for them to answer, I checked the photos I had taken of the documents in the office. The proof we needed was there. 911. "What is your emergency?" The calm voice of the dispatcher sounded in the phone. "My name is Helen Gutierrez," I said, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "I need to report an attempted murder. My daughter is planning to kill me and my grandson for insurance money. She has an accomplice, and they just captured a friend of mine who tried to help me." There was a pause on the other line. I could imagine what the operator was thinking. Another paranoid old lady imagining conspiracies. "Ma'am, where are you right now?" she asked, her tone professional but cautious. "On Western Avenue, near the 1500 block. I'm fleeing my house. Please, I need you to send patrol cars to 237 Bougainvillea Drive. My friend Ralph is in mortal danger. Do you have any proof of these accusations?" I have photographed documents and a witness, my 7-year-old grandson, who heard my daughter planning everything. I hesitated, then added, "I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. Please, there is no time to lose." As I spoke, a patrol car drove slowly down the avenue. I waved frantically, still with the phone to my ear. To my relief, the cruiser stopped. 2 officers got out, approaching with cautious expressions. "Police are here," I told the dispatcher. "I'm going to explain the situation to them." The next few minutes were a whirlwind. I quickly explained the situation to the officers, showing the photos of the documents on the cell phone. I mentioned Aidan, safe in Ralph's apartment, and Ralph's situation possibly injured and held hostage in my house. Something in my urgency, or perhaps the evidence I presented, must have convinced the officers. One of them spoke on the radio requesting backup, while the other helped me into the patrol car. "We're going to rescue your friend first," said the older officer, a man with a face marked by years of service. "Then we'll get your grandson. Can you give us the exact address where he is?" I provided the address of the old building and instructions to reach the employee apartment. My worry now was that Claire and her accomplice, realizing I had escaped, might deduce where Aidan would be. Would she remember Ralph and our old friendship? The patrol car sped through the streets, almost deserted at that hour of the morning. 2 other cruisers followed us, sirens silent, only lights flashing in the night. My heart was beating wildly as we approached my house. "There's an entrance around the back," I explained to the officer. "The kitchen door. Ralph must be downstairs." We stopped at a safe distance. The officers asked me to wait in the cruiser while they surrounded the house. I watched in anguish as they positioned themselves, communicating via radios. It seemed like an eternity, though it was probably only a few minutes. Then, everything happened very fast. I heard shouts of, "Police! Freeze!" followed by the sound of breaking glass. A door slammed violently. More shouts. A crash. And then silence. Minutes later, I saw Ralph being helped out of the house by 2 officers. My old friend was limping, with a visible cut on his forehead, but he was alive. I felt a relief so great that tears ran down my face. Immediately after, Marcus came out in handcuffs, escorted by 2 officers. He was a large man with tattoos on his arms and a furious expression on his face. I waited, heart clenched, for Claire, but she didn't appear. The older officer approached the cruiser where I was waiting. "The house is clear, ma'am, but your daughter isn't here." It seems she fled through the back when she realized we arrived. A chill ran down my spine. "Aidan," I whispered, "we need to get to my grandson before she does." The patrol car cut through the night at full speed, sirens blaring this time. I was sitting in the back seat, hands wringing with anxiety. Beside me, Ralph, with an improvised bandage on his forehead, looked equally worried. "She doesn't know where we were," he said, trying to calm me. I didn't mention the apartment when they caught me, but I couldn't calm down. There was a dark foreboding growing in my chest. Claire was smart. She knew my old friends, my old habits. If she remembered Ralph, she could deduce where to look. When we arrived at the old building, my heart almost stopped. The service door leading to the employee apartment was ajar. "Stay here," ordered the officer, drawing his weapon. But I couldn't obey. I jumped out of the cruiser and ran after him, ignoring the protests. Ralph followed me, limping. The hallway was dark and silent. The apartment door was closed, apparently intact. The officer knocked 3 times. "Aidan," I called, my voice trembling. "Aidan, honey, it's Grandma. Are you there?" Silence. A silence that pierced my ears like needles. The officer tried the handle locked. He stepped back a bit. Then he lunged with his shoulder, breaking down the door with a crash. The apartment was dark. The officer entered first, turning on his flashlight, followed by me and Ralph. He swept the small space with the beam of light, the empty kitchen, the living room with the messy sofa bed. "Aidan!" I called again, panic rising in my throat. It was then that I noticed something on the sofa bed, a piece of torn paper trapped under an empty glass. I took it with trembling hands and read the message written in hasty handwriting. "Mom found me. She said she needs to protect me from you, that you are crazy and making up stories. I'm scared, Grandma. Help." My knees gave way. Ralph caught me before I hit the floor. "She took him," I murmured, stunned. "Claire took Aidan." The officer immediately got on the radio, reporting a child abduction. Within minutes, an operation was being set up. Descriptions of Claire, her car, or whatever car she was using now, Aidan. Roadblocks at city exits, alerts on highways and at the airport. An Amber Alert was issued. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Claire was meticulous. She had been planning this for months. She certainly had escape routes prepared, maybe fake documents, and she knew Aidan better than anyone. She knew exactly what to say to make him cooperate, even temporarily. I was taken to the precinct along with Ralph, where we gave detailed statements. I showed the photos of the documents, recounted everything Aidan had heard, explained about the life insurance and Claire's growing greed. The detective, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes, listened to everything attentively. Contrary to what I feared, he didn't treat me like a confused old woman. The evidence was too strong, especially after the statement from Marcus, the accomplice, began to corroborate my story. He's cooperating to reduce his own sentence, the detective explained. He confirmed that your daughter hired him to stage a gas leak that would kill you and your grandson in your sleep. He would be paid with part of the insurance money. I felt nauseous hearing the confirmation of that macabre plan. "And what about Aidan?" I asked, voice breaking. "Do you have any leads?" The detective hesitated. "Not yet. But we are monitoring all routes out of the city. Your daughter won't get far." But I wasn't so sure. Hours passed, and every minute without news increased my anguish. Sitting in the precinct waiting room with an untouched cup of tea, I felt myself aging even faster. Ralph was by my side, in silence, occasionally squeezing my hand in solidarity. His face showed concern, but also determination. "We will find him, Mrs. Helen," he said after a long silence. "Aidan is a smart boy. He'll find a way to leave us clues." I nodded, trying to cling to that hope. Aidan really was extraordinary. His perception and intelligence had already saved us once. Maybe they could save him now. It was then that I remembered something I had overlooked, something Aidan had mentioned days ago, something about Claire and a special place. "Wait," I said, straightening up in the chair. "I think I know where she might have taken Aidan." Ralph and a passing officer looked at me expectantly. 2 weeks ago, Aidan mentioned that Claire took him to see a surprise house, a place in the country a few hours from the city. He got excited because there were animals and a lake. At the time, I thought it was just a day trip. The detective was called immediately. I explained my suspicion. Claire might have been preparing this place as a shelter where she would flee after the accident that would kill us. "Do you know where this property is located?" the detective asked. "Not exactly. Aidan mentioned it was near a small town. I think the name was St. Matthew or St. Anthony. Something like that. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. Investigators began checking records of properties recently purchased or rented in towns with Saint names within a few hours' radius of Chicago. Meanwhile, I received alarming news. Claire's car had been found abandoned at a gas station on the interstate heading west. She had likely switched vehicles. The search was getting complicated. The clock on the precinct wall read 5:30 a.m. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten slightly. I hadn't slept for almost 24 hours, but adrenaline and fear kept me alert. It was then that my phone, which had been returned after forensics examined the photos, vibrated in my pocket. An unknown number. I answered, with my heart pounding. "Hello? Grandma?" Aidan's voice, small and scared, made my heart leap. "Aidan, honey, where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," he whispered. "Mom is sleeping now. I found her cell phone and hid it to call." "You are so brave, my love," I said, trying to keep my voice calm while signaling frantically to the detective, who quickly called a technician to trace the call. "Can you tell me where you are?" "It's a house in the country. It has a lake and lots of trees. We came by car, but it was a long trip, and I slept a little. When I woke up, we were already here. Do you see any signs? Any names nearby?" "I can't look out the window now. Mom might wake up." His voice trembled. "She's different, Grandma. She says weird things. She says you want to hurt us." "Don't believe her, honey. I'm doing everything to find you." There was a silence, then a noise of movement. When Aidan spoke again, his voice was even lower. "There is a mailbox at the entrance. It says St. Benedict Ranch, Box 142. My heart raced. It was the clue we needed. "Aidan, you are incredible," I whispered. "Now listen well. Find a safe place to hide. The police are coming there, but it might take a little while. You need to stay away from your mother. Do you understand?" "I understand. There is an old barn behind the house. I'm going to hide there." "That's it, honey. And Aidan," I hesitated, feeling my throat tighten. "I love you so much. Everything is going to be fine." "I love you too, Grandma," he whispered. Then, in an even lower tone, "She's moving. I need to hang up." The call dropped. I jumped up, relaying the information to the detective. Within minutes, an operation was being organized. The state highway heading west had several ranches and farms near Box 142, but a place called St. Benedict Ranch would be easy to locate. "You must stay here," the detective said as the officers geared up. "We will go get your grandson and arrest your daughter." But I couldn't just wait. Aidan was alone, facing the terror of discovering that his own mother was capable of hurting him and his grandmother. He needed to see a familiar face when he was rescued. I'm going with you, I said in a tone that admitted no argument. I can wait in the patrol car, away from danger, but I need to be there for Aidan. After some resistance, the detective agreed on the condition that I remain at a safe distance until the situation was controlled. Ralph insisted on accompanying me despite his injuries. I promised the boy I would protect him, he said simply. Thus, at the first light of morning, we set off westward in a caravan of patrol cars. The sun was rising on the horizon, dyeing the sky in shades of pink and gold that contrasted cruelly with the darkness in my heart. During the journey, I couldn't stop thinking about what had driven Claire to this point. My sweet little girl, whom I had rocked in my arms, whom I had watched take her first steps, say her first words. How had she transformed into someone capable of coldly planning the death of her own mother and her own son? Money was certainly part of the answer, but there was something else. A coldness. A disconnection that I had seen grow over the years. Perhaps it had started after my son-in-law's death, or perhaps the signs were there long before, and I, blinded by a mother's love, didn't want to see them. These bitter reflections accompanied me throughout the trip as I watched the urban landscape gradually give way to fields and small rural properties. When we finally arrived at Box 142, my heart was in my throat. A discreet sign indicated the entrance to St. Benedict Ranch, a dirt road winding through trees until it disappeared around a bend. The officers stopped the patrol cars before the entrance to avoid alerting Claire. From there on, they would proceed on foot, surrounding the property. "Wait here, Mrs. Helen," the detective said in a firm but kind tone. "I promise we will bring your grandson back safely." I nodded, resigned. Ralph held my hand as we watched the officers move away in tactical formation, disappearing among the trees. The minutes that followed were the longest of my life. Sitting in the patrol car, I peered through the window, trying to see something beyond the trees. The police radio crackled occasionally with coded communications I couldn't understand. Then, we heard a distant scream, angry voices, and the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. That single shot resonated in the quiet morning like thunder, making my heart stop for a second. Without thinking, I opened the patrol car door and started running down the dirt road, ignoring Ralph's shouts behind me. "Mrs. Helen, come back!" But I couldn't wait. Aidan was in there. My grandson, my light, the only person who really mattered. I ran like I hadn't run in decades, ignoring the pain in my injured hip and my panting breath. Age seemed to have disappeared, driven by the adrenaline of fear. Ralph was limping behind me, trying to catch up. Rounding the curve of the road, I spotted the house, a simple 2-story construction with a wooden porch. About 100 yards back was an old barn, exactly as Aidan had described. Officers were positioned around the property, weapons drawn. There was movement on the porch. I squinted, trying to see better, and felt my blood freeze as I recognized Claire. She was pale, disheveled, almost unrecognizable in the fury that distorted her face. In one hand she held something that gleamed under the morning sun, a gun, and with the other arm she held Aidan in front of her like a human shield. "Nobody come closer," she screamed, her shrill voice cutting the air, "or I swear I'll shoot." The detective was positioned a few yards from the porch, partially protected by a tree. "Miss Claire, drop the weapon and let the boy go." He spoke in a firm but calm tone. "There is no way out of here. The house is surrounded." "You don't understand," Claire yelled, voice breaking. "She stole everything from me. My father left that money for me, not for her. She never let me touch anything, always controlling, always dictating how I should live." I stood paralyzed a few yards away, hidden by a parked police SUV further up the drive. Her words hit me like stabs. This was how she saw me, as a controller depriving her of what was rightfully hers. Aidan was pale, eyes wide with terror, but strangely calm. His eyes scanned the terrain around him, as if looking for an escape route. Even in that extreme situation, my grandson maintained the presence of mind that characterized him. "His father left the money for all of you," the detective responded, trying to buy time. "I'm sure we can resolve this without anyone getting hurt." "Liar!" Claire tightened her grip around Aidan. "She manipulated the will. She always manipulated everything, and now she's making me look crazy, inventing stories that I want to kill her." Ralph finally caught up to me, panting. He grabbed my arm, preventing me from advancing further. "Don't expose yourself," he whispered. "The police know what they're doing." but I couldn't stand still. With every second that passed, the situation seemed more volatile. Claire was visibly unstable, eyes wild, the hand holding the gun shaking slightly. It was then that I noticed Aidan looking directly toward the barn behind the house. His eyes darted back and forth as if trying to communicate something to me. I followed his gaze and noticed an officer positioning himself silently behind the barn, moving to flank the house. I understood what Aidan was doing. He was consciously distracting his mother, keeping her focused on the front of the house while the officers positioned themselves behind. Even in this terrible situation, my 7-year-old grandson was cooperating with the police, showing courage and intelligence that left me speechless. "Claire!" I called out, taking a step forward, ignoring Ralph's desperate tug on my arm. She turned sharply. The gun pointed in my direction. Her eyes widened upon seeing me. "You!" she hissed. "How did you manage to escape? You should be dead in the fire." "There was no fire, Claire," I replied calmly, taking another step. The officers tensed but didn't interfere, realizing I was buying time. "Your plan failed because Aidan heard everything. He saved our lives." Claire's face twisted in a mixture of rage and disbelief. She looked down at Aidan, who held her gaze without blinking. "You," she whispered to her son, "you betrayed me." "He didn't betray anyone," I said, continuing to advance slowly. "He just protected who he loves, just as I always tried to protect you." "Protect?" She laughed, a shrill and almost hysterical sound. "You suffocated me, always controlling my life, my money, my dreams. When Dad died, that money should have been mine." "The money was never the problem, Claire," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite my racing heart. "Your father wanted you to live on your own merits, not dependent on an inheritance. He loved you. I love you." "Liar!" she screamed, the hand with the gun shaking visibly. "If you loved me, you would have given me what was rightfully mine." At that moment, I realized that nothing I said would convince her. Greed and resentment had corroded her mind for years, perhaps decades, transforming her into someone I barely recognized. "Let Aidan go," I pleaded, "now just a few yards from the porch. He has nothing to do with this. It's between you and me." I saw a flash of something hesitation, maybe even guilt, pass across Claire's face. For a brief moment, it seemed she considered my request. It was in that instant that Aidan acted. With a quick movement that took everyone by surprise, he bit the arm holding him and threw himself to the side, rolling across the porch. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. Claire screamed in pain. The gun fired, the shot lost in the air, and the officers swarmed from all directions. I ran the last few yards to the porch, ignoring the officers shouting for me to stay back. All I could see was Aidan curled up by the railing, shivering. I reached him at the same instant the officers subdued Claire, forcing her to the ground and handcuffing her. She was screaming and struggling, unrecognizable in her fury. I hugged Aidan with all the strength I had left, feeling his small body trembling against mine. He was alive. He was safe. "Grandma," he whispered, clinging to me. "You came." "I will always come, my love," I replied, tears finally rolling freely. "Always." Over Aidan's shoulder, my eyes met Claire's as she was led away by the officers. For a moment, mother and daughter looked at each other across the unbridgeable abyss that now separated us. There was no longer anger in her eyes, only a desolate emptiness. The woman I had known, my daughter, seemed to have disappeared completely, leaving only a shell of who she was. And then she was taken to the patrol car, and I focused totally on Aidan, on the miracle of having him safe in my arms. The sun was now shining high in the sky, illuminating my grandson's tear-streaked face. I ran my hand through his hair, amazed at his courage. "How did you know she was planning that?" I asked softly when we were sitting in the ambulance that had arrived to check us over. "How did you manage to realize her plan?" Aidan bit his lower lip, thoughtful. "I always wake up early, Grandma. Mom thinks I sleep late, but actually, I stay quiet in bed, thinking." I smiled, caressing his face. So observant, so attentive to everything. "That morning I heard her on the phone," he continued. "She was talking differently, like she was angry but trying not to show it. I went to the hallway and stood listening by the office door. The paramedic finished checking Aidan's vitals and gave us a little privacy, moving away to talk to the officers. She talked about the gas and about us sleeping." Aidan lowered his voice and said she wanted Grandpa's money, that she was tired of waiting, that it was going to look like an accident. He looked at me, his eyes suddenly older than his age. I knew no one would believe me if I told. Adults never believe kids when it's something important. The last sentence broke my heart. How many times had he tried to alert me before with small observations that I had dismissed as childish imagination? "But I believed you at the airport," I said softly. A small smile lit up his face. "Yes, you believed when it mattered." I hugged him again, feeling immense gratitude for this small being who, with his extraordinary perception, had saved us. The detective approached us, his face showing a mixture of relief and concern. "Aidan and you need to go to the hospital for a full checkup," he said. "After that, we'll need detailed statements, but that can wait a bit." I nodded, grateful for the sensitivity. "Claire." I hesitated, still unable to fully process what my own daughter had become. "What is going to happen to her?" "She will face serious charges," the detective replied, keeping his voice low so Aidan wouldn't hear all the details. "Attempted aggravated murder, kidnapping of a minor, unlawful possession of a weapon, among others. With the accomplice's testimony and the evidence you collected, the case is very solid." A deep sadness enveloped me. Not for the Claire of now, that person who pointed a gun at me and used her own son as a shield, but for the girl she had been, for the daughter I had raised with so much love. "Can I see her before you take her away?" I asked, surprising even myself. The detective hesitated, evaluating my state. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "I need that closure." He nodded slowly. "I'll check, but it will be brief and under supervision." I turned to Aidan, who was watching our conversation attentively. "Honey, I need to talk to your mom for a minute. Will you be okay here with Mr. Ralph?" Aidan hesitated, a flash of fear crossing his face. "Is she going to hurt you again?" "No," I assured him. "There are police everywhere. We are safe now." Ralph, who had remained discreetly by our side the whole time, stepped forward. "We'll be fine here, champ. Your grandma will be back soon." Aidan nodded reluctantly, letting me walk away. The detective led me to one of the patrol cars parked in the shade of a tree. Claire was sitting in the back seat, hands cuffed, gaze lost in the void. When I approached, her eyes slowly focused on me. There was no more fury in them, only an immense weariness, and something that looked for an instant like shame. "Can I speak with her?" I asked the officer guarding her. He nodded, opening the car door but staying alert by my side. "Claire," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Why?" She held my gaze for a few seconds before looking away at the floor. "You would never understand," she murmured. "Try to explain to me," I insisted. "I owe it to Aidan. I need to understand how you could plan to kill your own son." A spasm of pain crossed her face. I wasn't going to." She hesitated, as if realizing the absurdity of what she was about to say. "At first, it was just about you. The insurance money. The house. I was drowning in debt, Mother. More than you imagine." "And Aidan?" She swallowed hard. "Marcus said we needed to include him, that 2 deaths by a gas leak would be more credible than 1. That if only you died, the police would suspect me immediately." Her voice cracked. "I tried to argue that we could just send him away to a boarding school, something like that, but Marcus insisted it was all or nothing." "And you agreed," I said, not as a question, but as a painful realization. Claire didn't answer. Her silence was more damning than any confession. "Do you realize what you did? What you almost did?" My voice was now shaking with contained emotion. "Aidan is going to grow up knowing that his own mother planned his death for money. What kind of scar will that leave on him?" Tears began to run down Claire's face. Tears that I couldn't tell if they were genuine remorse or just self-pity. "I wasn't thinking clearly," she whispered. "The debts, the pressure. It seemed like the only way out." "There is always another way out," I replied. "You could have told me about the debts. We could have sold the house, used part of the insurance money legally. I would have helped you." "You would have controlled me like you always did," she retorted, a flash of the old bitterness returning. "You would have dictated how and when I could use the money." I sighed, realizing it was useless. The distorted version Claire had of me, of our relationship, was deeply rooted in her mind. Perhaps it had always been there, growing silently while I believed we were close. "You are going to need help, Claire," I said finally. "Not just from lawyers, but from doctors. There is something broken inside you that money could never fix." She looked at me, her face a mask of defeat. And Aidan. Aidan will stay with me, I replied firmly. I will do everything in my power to help him get over this, to help him understand that what you did doesn't define who he is. Claire nodded slowly, as if that were expected. You'll be a good mother to him, she said quietly. Better than I would ever be. It was the closest thing to a conscience I would see in her that day. The officer indicated our time was up. I stood, feeling strangely lighter, as if a weight had been removed from my shoulders. Goodbye, Claire, I said, looking one last time at the woman my daughter had become. I hope you find peace someday. I turned my back and walked toward Aidan and Ralph, who were waiting for me by the ambulance. I didn't look back when the patrol car drove away, taking Claire to a future of trials, sentences, and, I hoped, treatment. Aidan ran to me as soon as he saw me, hugging my legs. Are you okay, Grandma? I crouched down, getting to his eye level. I am, honey. And you? He nodded gravely. I'm sad, but relieved. It's weird to feel both things at the same time. No, my love, I smiled, moved by the emotional maturity of this extraordinary child. It is perfectly normal. In the days and weeks that followed, we faced the bureaucratic and emotional whirlwind that ensued. Statements to the police, preliminary hearings, appointments with child psychologists for Aidan. The media tried to transform our tragedy into a sensationalist circus, but we managed to keep some privacy thanks to the detective who protected us as much as possible. Claire was formally charged and awaited trial in pretrial detention. Her accomplice, Marcus, took a plea deal, providing details that only solidified the case against her. Preliminary psychiatric evaluations suggested a severe personality disorder, exacerbated by financial problems and long-standing resentments. Aidan and I moved temporarily into Ralph's apartment until we managed to find a new house, a new beginning far from the dark memories of the old residence. Aidan's therapist said he was adapting surprisingly well, considering the trauma. His resilience was remarkable, although there were nights when he woke up screaming, chased by nightmares. On one of those nights, while I calmed him after a particularly bad dream, Aidan asked me the question I knew would come eventually. Grandma, he said, his voice small in the darkness of the room, why did Mom want to hurt us? Didn't she love us? I sat on the edge of his bed, searching for the right words, how to explain something so complex and painful to a 7-year-old child. 7-year-old. Aidan, I began slowly. Your mom is sick. Not like when someone has the flu or a stomach ache. It's a sickness that affects how she thinks and feels. It makes her see the world in a distorted way. He absorbed this in silence, his eyes reflecting the weak light of the night lamp. She loved us. In her own way, I continued. But that sickness made her make terrible decisions, decisions that healthy people wouldn't make. Is she going to get better someday? He asked, his hopeful voice breaking my heart. I don't know, honey, I answered honestly. Some people with that sickness get better with treatment, others don't. What I know is that you are safe now, and that I love you more than anything in this world. Aidan nodded, seeming to accept that explanation for now. I love you too, Grandma, he said, hugging me. Thank you for believing me. I will always believe you, I promised, kissing his forehead. Always. We stayed like that for a long time, hugged in the twilight, grandmother and grandson, united by a bond that betrayal and danger had strengthened instead of broken. Eventually, Aidan fell asleep in my arms, his breathing becoming deep and regular. I watched his face relaxed in sleep, amazed at his courage, his perception, his capacity to love despite everything. The day Aidan pulled my arm in the dark parking garage at the airport, begging me not to go back home, he didn't just save our lives, he taught me the most important lesson of my life. That sometimes the deepest truths come from the smallest voices, and that wisdom is not the privilege of age. I was 70 years old when I learned to truly listen, and thanks to that, I now had the opportunity to watch my grandson grow, to help him overcome the trauma, to build with him a new life where trust and love could flourish again. As I watched him sleep, I made a silent promise that I would spend the rest of my days honoring the courage of that little angel who, with a simple request, Grandma, believe me, had changed everything. The road ahead would be long and sometimes painful. There would be more nightmares, more difficult questions, more tears, but there would also be laughter, discoveries, shared joys, and above all, there would be truth between us, the most solid foundation upon which to rebuild our lives. The sun was beginning to rise, sending the first golden rays through the blinds. A new day. A new beginning. I tucked the blanket around Aidan and, careful not to wake him, silently left the room. In the small kitchen of Ralph's apartment, I made coffee and sat at the table, watching the city wake up outside. I thought about all the mornings to come, all the days Aidan and I would have together. I thought also of Claire, alone in her cell, confronting the consequences of her choices. The pain was still there, probably always would be, but next to it grew something new, hope. Hope that one day Aidan could look back and see not only the betrayal that almost cost us our lives, but also the moment he found his voice and his courage. Hope that together we could transform that terrible night into the beginning of something beautiful, not an ending. Because deep down, that was what mattered. Not how stories begin, but how we choose to continue them. And ours, mine and Aidan's, was just in the first chapter. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments which part left you with your mouth open. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't publish here. I'll see you there.